Thank you for coming. And thank you, Terry, for this opportunity to share my family's history regarding two companies. And thank you, Jessica, for the assistance you gave me each time I came into the History Center to do research. Oh, there I am having lunch with my friends. The history of the William Horn Structural Steel Company began with its founder, William Horn, who had two sons, William Jacob and Edwin. Edwin had children, but none of them were interested in the steel business. They followed other career paths. But William Jacob Horn had a son, William Carl, my husband. He followed in his father's footsteps. The fourth generation, my son, Robert Horn. And the fifth generation, my grandson, John Bola. Mr. William Horn, my husband's grandfather, was born on April 12, 1864. The family lived in Louisville, Kentucky. That is where he worked and learned the steel business and the art of ornamental ironwork. The company Mr. Horn worked for sent him to Chicago to oversee the construction and installation of metal elevator gates and doors in some of the downtown buildings. Some of the gates and doors were made of brass and had detailed, intricate patterns. Marshall Field's downtown store, now Macy's, has metal, shiny brass doors, and the Fine Arts Building on South Michigan Avenue still has the old black gate in front of the building's elevator doors. The last time I was there, I watched as the man who operates the elevator closed the door and gate, pressed the button, sat on the fixed stool in the corner, and we were on our way up. The restored Burnham Hotel in the old Reliance building on State and Washington Streets also has black steel gates and decoration in and outside of the elevator. Here are samples of the work of the artisans in steel. The middle one, I hope you can see it clearly enough, there are peacocks on the doors, and naturally those doors lead you into the C.D. Peacock jewelry store inside the Palmer House. Mr. Horn realized that there was business opportunity in Chicago. He even envisioned having his own steel company. Mrs. Horn and he liked the city and made their home in Chicago. A son was born to Mr. and Mrs. William Horn in May of 1895, named William Jacob. Their second son, named Edwin, was born in November of 1899. Mr. Horn's plan was realized on April 13, 1896, when he was granted a Chicago building permit for the construction of a steel plant at 908 West Lake Street. The business was incorporated as the William Horn Structural Iron Works. The mission of the newly formed business was to provide products of quality materials with excellent workmanship, delivered on schedule and at a fair price, and to serve clients with efficiency and courtesy. The goal was achieved by management working in close collaboration with the employees. Through mutual respect and understanding, the company earned the loyalty of each employee. Business throughout the years was good, and eventually the company expanded to a new and larger shop and office building in Chicago at 336 North Leavitt Street. The Structural Ironworks Company supplied steel for residential, industrial, and commercial use. Their steel was used to support the water towers that were placed on many roofs. There still are water towers on some roofs in Chicago. In January 1958, Edwin Horn's son, Ted, was on his way to work in Chicago when he saw workmen demolishing an old building on South Wacker Drive. He wrote this letter to his dad, telling him of seeing the name William Horn Ironworks on a beam facing Wacker Drive. Ted estimated the beam to be from the late 1880s. The shop was one large room that was heated by salamanders. A salamander was a steel barrel-shaped heater on legs with an open charcoal fire. It's understandable that fires could break out, and that is what happened at the ironworks plant. Fortunately, it was a small, contained fire, which the Chicago Fire Department extinguished quickly. The damage was minor. Mr. Horn, in the white shirt, would take his sons to the steel plant occasionally. The boy wearing a cap with one hand on a piece of equipment is William Jacob, at about 8 years of age. The picture is old and faded, but you may see his younger brother, Edwin, sitting on a stack of steel beside a worker standing on a barrel. While both boys were growing up, they were learning the steel business. After graduating from Crane High School, William Jacob was employed at the company. The workers fabricated steel for general contractors in Chicago and also produced various ornamental iron pieces. The table you see there is from the Chicago shop on Levitt Street. Some time ago, I had a new piece of granite placed on top, and the table has a place in my home. In May of 1918, William Jacob applied to the Merrill Stevens Shipbuilding Corporation in Jacksonville, Florida, to be accepted into the United States Emergency Fleet Instructor Training Center. This government-sponsored program was developed to train men to become shipbuilders or repair ships. William Jacob was accepted. He completed the program and graduated, but his classmates and he did not receive an assignment of duty because the war ended 2 months later on November 11, 1918. Military defense measures were rolled back and the program was discontinued. William Jacob returned to Chicago and resumed working in the office with his father at the steel plant. William Jacob and his wife Hildegard had a son born on December 18, 1925, named William Carl Horn. Hereafter, I'll refer to him as Bill. Bill and I were married in 1951. In 1927, Mr. and Mrs. William J. Horn bought a home in Elmhurst, and that same year, his brother Edwin married. The couple made their home in River Forest until their move to Geneva. Business was good. Everything was going well. But on a Friday night in December 1928, a fire of undetermined origin broke out. The blaze lasted several hours. The firemen were fighting the fire in near zero weather. As you can see, the fire totally destroyed the plant and much of the equipment. Mr. William Horn used his capital and borrowed additional funds to build a new building and to replace destroyed equipment. There was a rush to complete and equip the building so as not to lose business contacts and to provide work for the men who were anxious to return to their jobs. Business resumed in the new building until the economic depression of the 30s. New construction came to a standstill. The company had little work. It was a sad day for Mr. William Horn when he had no choice but to let most of the men go. Despite the depressed economy, the company survived those lean years. On October 27, 1933, Mr. William Horn passed away at Geneva Community Hospital. Ownership of the steel plant passed to his oldest son, William Jacob Horn. The general economy was beginning to improve. More bidding was taking place and more contracts were signed to supply steel for jobs. William Jacob was pleased that he could rehire the men who had worked in the shop. William Jacob and Edwin inherited property adjoining the north side of the ice plant on River Street. That parcel extended from Hamilton Street to a bit beyond Stevens Street. And you see in the picture, William Horn Structural Steel is to the north, Geneva Products adjacent to the south, William Howell Company next to the ice plant. Across the river, Bennett Mill, and Listed there is the creamery. The creamery had become the Geneva Electrical Power Plant. The brothers decided to relocate the steel plant from Chicago to their property in Geneva, just north of the ice plant. On November 5, 1937, Victor Johnson, the building commissioner in Geneva, granted permission for the construction of a new building. 4 months later, the March 1937 issue of the local paper reported that a charter of incorporation had been issued in Springfield to the William Horne Structural Steel Company on River Street. The William Horne Structural Iron Works had undergone a name change. The incorporators were William J. and Edwin Horne. The article states that the plant will be a valuable asset to the city. The new shop was a building of corrugated steel with an attached office. It had a wide picture window with a clear view of the river, the dam, and the riverbank on the opposite side. Sometimes fishermen were seen walking through the parking lot going down to the river's edge to fish. And as Bill was growing up, he was learning the steel business. William Jacob was a member of the Geneva bowling team. I'm sure some of you may remember one or two or more of these men. Starting on the left, we have John A. Wheeler, who conducted a lumber business at 716 West State Street. It's a carpet store now. Werner Meininger had a partner in the Geneva Laundry on State Street. I believe that's a location of the Thai restaurant now. Leo Ciro worked at the company. His son Bill worked in the company office. Richard Skoglund was funeral director and owner of a furniture store on State Street, which now is the Starflower Shop. John Anderson, his brother and he operated the State Street jewelry store, which remained a jewelry store through the years, except for a short while ago when it relocated. And then my father-in-law, William Jacob. On October 10, 1941, the Geneva Republican reported that the William Horne Structural Steel Company was under contract to build a thrill ride called the Flying Zephyr for amusement parks. The ride consisted of 12 cars hung on steel cables. The cars would be raised to a height of about 40 feet and then swung around through the air at a speed of about 60 miles an hour. A sales order indicates that a telescopic lighting tower was also ordered at a cost of $1,230.46. In May 1942, after an investigation of the company's background, the War Department sent a telegram stating that the company passed clearance and a competitive bid from the William Horne Structural Steel Company had been accepted. Soon after, the company was under contract to complete the order as specified. The raw steel was purchased from the Joseph T. Ryerson Company of Chicago. Throughout the years, the Horne Steel Company supplied fabricated steel to the war effort. At this time, the company was receiving orders for fabricated steel from the Challenge Company in Batavia that was producing armaments during the war. Bill joined the company following his graduation from Duke University and his discharge from the Navy after World War II. As an aside, I'm sure some of you remember Dr. Charles Hanson, the pediatrician in Geneva. He was on campus with Bill at the same time. The following is a sampling of William Horne Structural Steel clients. In 1942, the company supplied and erected fabricated steel for August Wilson, who had a contract with Geneva High School for bleacher seats. Modern Steel Equipment Company, which later became Geneva Modern Kitchens. Burgess Norton Manufacturing Company, the Howell Company, Campana Sales Company in Batavia, Elgin State Hospital, the Ruth Van Sickle Ford House, sometimes called the Coal House. We supplied those formed steel members. Dunbar Capel had a plant in Geneva and also Batavia. The man pictured is Richard Skoglund. He's standing under a beam during construction of the First National Bank located on 3rd Street in Geneva. And there you see the sign, Horn Steel, on the beam. Unfortunately, that bank is closed. In the spring of 1959, the company furnished and erected steel for the new motor vehicle facility west in Hillside. The building can be seen on the right when driving east on the Eisenhower Expressway. Pictured here are William J. Stratton, Governor, and Charles Carpentier, Secretary of State. They're turning over first shovels of dirt. We also did steel for the Knipe meatpacking plant when it was located in Elburn. William Jacob Horn passed away on April 17, 1966 at Elmhurst Hospital. Ownership of the company passed on to Bill, my husband. Bill and his uncle Edwin worked together in the office until Edwin retired in 1967. Edwin and his wife moved from St. Charles to Wisconsin, where he passed away on June 27, 1977. According to an article in a November 1966 issue of the local paper, the Kane County and Geneva city governments were discussing a possible expansion of the present Kane County Courthouse in Geneva, or perhaps the construction of a new building. After many meetings and much discussion, the local newspaper reported that architects were instructed to proceed with plans for the new courthouse, which was to be located along the west bank of the Fox River. But plans had changed. The Kane County and City of Geneva officials decided that the new courthouse would be built west of the City of Geneva. According to an article in the September 18, 1975 local paper, again, bids were open to the public for parcels of property along the west bank of the Fox River, which the City of Geneva no longer needed for the new Kane County Courthouse. Throughout this time, conditions were somewhat unstable on River Lane, but daily operations continued as usual at the steel plant. The headline of the November 6, 1975 issue of the local paper reads, "Riverfront sold to 3 developers, William McConaughey, Kent Chodine, and Tom Rossiter had formed a real estate development firm called Venture 96. Their plans were to completely renovate the riverfront to include commercial and residential structures. So they began to purchase additional parcels of riverfront real estate. Meanwhile, Bill had been attending periodic meetings with the men of Venture 96. Bill was anxious for a decision regarding his property. In 1978, final negotiations were underway to acquire the William Horn Structural Steel Company property on River Lane, and Bill took ownership of vacant real estate on the east side of Geneva in an industrial complex located south of Route 38 behind McDonald's restaurant. Throughout the 44 years the steel plant was located on River Lane, the imprint of the steel company has been established in many ways in and around Geneva. A sampling of our clients were John Wheeler, his lumber business on West State Street, Westway Homes, the Genho Restaurant, Harrison School Edition, the Circular Stairway at the Peck Farm, Mid-Valley Lumber, which was located on 3rd Street across from the Northwestern Station, National Accelerator Laboratory in Batavia, and Wessel Court. Construction began for a new shop and office for the company. Daily operations continued, however, at the River Lane location as long as possible. In the spring of 1981, the new structure was completely occupied. All equipment and tools were in the new shop, and the office had been furnished. The exact location of the William Horn Structural Steel Company is on a cul-de-sac at 1101 Commerce Drive. Our neighbors are E&T Glass and Randall Pressure Systems. The plant was raised 1981, and you see in the photograph there the two silos from Joshua Feed and Coal Company. Our son Robert joined the company about this time. He represents the fourth generation. In the new location, the company supplied steel for commercial, industrial, residential projects in Geneva and nearby cities. The following slides will represent some of the completed business transactions while in the new location. This Geneva kiosk is on 3rd Street, was designed by Fraser Raftery and Orr and their architect in the firm, James Kaiser. The Carroll Towers in St. Charles, Gelsert plant in West Chicago. Johnson Control is a business in the industrial complex where our company is located. They contracted with us to have an addition to their plant. There you see a helicopter carrying a steel beam. It will be placed on the job site. It doesn't happen very often, thank goodness, though not that steel can't be erected using a crane because of very close quarters in which to work or exceptional height beyond the reach of the crane's boom. We did the steel canopies at the Bertucci restaurant in Naperville, which unfortunately is closed. The Army Corps of Engineers contacted us to design and construct heavy-duty steel screens fitted with electric wiring designed to prevent the Asian carp from swimming and reaching Lake Michigan. We furnished the pointed top of the tower at Potawatomi Park, the canopy at the West Chicago Airport. 2013, Sherman Hospital had a commemorative sign placed at the site of the original Sherman Hospital in Elgin. The company has also installed railings and ramps at Waubonsee Community College, other schools, and also commercial facilities so that they would be in compliance with the American Disabilities Act. We've done railings around town. There you see one from Graham's Chocolate entrance and the Harrington Inn. Mr. Jenkins designed the steel railing at River Park. We furnished the finished materials and installed the distinctive railing. We've done spiral stairs. There's one at the Sunshine Dental Care Office and Residence on West State Street, and we installed those at Wessel Court Apartments. There are two light fixtures there you see. They were designed in the 50s by my husband, and they're both still in my home operating today. I also have a few metal tables of various sizes and heights with glass tops in my home. The tree sculpture was done for Christmas ornaments, miniature family photos, necklaces, scarves, or any other purpose you may think of. The one table was designed for Artemisia, the shop on 3rd Street where the Provincial House had been. The last time I was there, 2 of the tables were on the first level of the shop and 1 was on the 2nd floor. The pictured anvil dates back to the late 1800s and the first location of the Chicago William Horne Structural Ironworks, and that anvil is in our office today. The company has survived through 2 world wars, the Depression of the 30s, and later periods of a weak economy, sometimes a shortage of materials, and aggressive competition from other steel fabricators. In my opinion, our endurance is attributed in part to the leadership model in effect and the loyalty of highly skilled employees who are artisans with steel. An incredible milestone is what Christine Sobek, president of Waubonsee Community College, wrote in her congratulatory letter to the company on its 110th anniversary on April 13th, 2006. Next week, on April 13th of this year, the company will celebrate its 118th year in business. My husband Bill passed away in 2005. At this time, my son Robert and I are stewards of the company. We conduct business daily along with the men in the office and shop who are dependable, conscientious, and loyal. Each are professionals in their field of work. My grandson John came into the company in 2005. He represents the 5th generation to work at the William Horn Structural Steel Company. In conclusion, what once was an industrial site along the west bank of the Fox River is now the site you see before you, River Park, a natural, serene setting for us to enjoy. The River Park is also a backdrop for interesting and entertaining events and activities which are scheduled there for our pleasure. And I thank you all for coming this afternoon. And next, I'd like to present a historical perspective on the Geneva Crystal Ice Company. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge the work of John Butler. The family had lived in Geneva, and his father worked at the Geneva Crystal Ice Company. John had conducted research of his own. He interviewed his father many times, and he compiled a report. And from his report, I have gleaned some of my information. The earliest business Mr. William Horn established in Geneva was the Crystal Ice Company in 1920. Before August of 1921, there was an ice business in Geneva run by Mr. Nels Pearson, who lived at the corner of Anderson Boulevard and Peyton Street. Workers would harvest the ice from the Fox River near Stevens Street, cover it with straw, and store it in an ice house nearby. There are 2 disadvantages to this method. The first is that ice is harvested only in the coldest months of winter. The second is that the ice is contaminated by debris and industrial pollution. The river was a catalyst for the development of industries because of the electric power that could be generated. That was one of the reasons a group of investors formulated a business plan to build an ice plant along the west bank of the Fox River. The Geneva Republican of January 30th, 1920, reported on rumors in the community that an artificial ice plant would be coming to town. The city and nearby towns wanted to have access to a plentiful amount of quality ice year-round, so there was strong interest and enthusiasm for establishing the artificial ice plant. A group of investors had purchased property located on the west bank of the river between Hamilton and State Streets. William Cummings, a local contractor, had already been hired to remove debris in preparation for the construction of a new building. The investors were going to outfit it with the most up-to-date machinery and equipment for manufacturing ice. The newspaper report estimated the total cost would be about $150,000. The company would be doing a general retail and wholesale artificial ice business. On April 16, 1920, the local newspaper reported on information released by the press in Springfield that the Crystal Ice Company of Geneva was incorporated on April 10, 1920. The 5 investors put up $150,000 in the following portions. F.W. Walther of Oak Park, $80,000. He owned and operated an artificial ice plant in Joliet. William Horn of Chicago, $30,000. He owned a steel business in Chicago. Mr. Horn was born in 1864, so he was 56 years old at this time. S.A. Mealbush of Forest Park, $20,000. A.C. Lautenschlager of Geneva, $15,000. He lived on North 2nd Street in Geneva. Leonard C. Mead of Geneva, $5,000. Mr. Mead, an attorney in Geneva, was the grandfather of the late Allen Mead. I'm sure some of you here knew Allen or remember him as a publisher of the Geneva Republican. The chosen site had three distinct advantages. The first was its location along the Fox River and near the dam which spanned it. This meant power would be available to the ice plant by installing water wheels to use the river as a power source. The Howell Company used water wheels to generate power for their operations, and so did the Bennett Mill, which was located across the river. 5 water wheels for the ice plant were purchased from the James Leffel and Company of Springfield, Ohio, which still is in business today. The cost was $15,400. The water wheels powered an electric generator also. It was estimated to be 6 feet high and 6 feet in diameter. This generator produced electricity for the interior lighting of the ice plant, and it was powerful enough to produce an excess which the city of Geneva purchased and used for its outdoor street lighting. The flow of water to the water wheels was controlled by a governor, which was made in Rockford, Illinois, by the Woodward Governor Company, which also is still in business. As an aside, the same 2 companies supplied and installed water wheels on governors in the Baker Hotel when it was built in 1928. When the river would be low and the power source from the river diminished, the plan was to disengage the water wheels and have the steam engines take over to supply the power necessary to run the machinery in the ice plant. The second advantage was the secondary spur line of the Chicago and Northwestern Railway. This secondary spur line separated from the main spur at the corner of Stevens and Edison Street. The spur line then ran east along Stevens Street, past the city cemetery and what is now Wheeler Park. Then it crossed the street on an angle. It continued eastward down to the Fox River, where it turned to the south along River Street. The line also serviced the Howell Company, which was south of the ice plant. The tracks then crossed State Street. Railroad cars would deliver coal to fire the city's electrical generating plant, which was located on the south side of State Street. The building which is available now for parties and banquets, which is next to the Harrington Inn, was the site of the city's power plant. The secondary spur railroad tracks were removed in 1972. The third advantage was an asset located on the property itself, 3 deep artesian wells. One well was 2,400 feet deep. Water samples were taken from the well, tested in Chicago, and found to be exceptionally pure and clear. Samples of ice were made from the water. Technicians were so impressed, 1 block of ice was exhibited in an airtight case in a Chicago business. An article in the November 12, 1920 local newspaper reported that a 400-horsepower steam engine from the Flyer and Stowell Company of Milwaukee had been delivered. Olaf Peterson, the company superintendent, who was also the city engineer, said that the engine was the largest one in central Kane County. Several carloads of ice-making machinery had arrived on the spur railroad track. The Markoff Brothers Construction Company of Elgin, who had been contracted in May to erect the building, races, and cement walls, was making good progress. The 5 water wheels will be put in place at the west side race by contractor William Cummings when the cement walls are all completed. The cost for the cement work alone was estimated to be several $1,000s. A compressor had arrived at the plant recently. The compressor had 2 functions: to produce strong pressure to bring water up from the well, and to provide light pressure to feed air into the freezing tanks. One of the major suppliers to the project was William Horn Structural Ironworks Company, located at Lake and Levitt Streets in Chicago. The company supplied the overhead I-beams, tubing, and related structural components. The estimated cost of the materials was $11,000. The plant was nearly completed when major financial difficulties developed. Further construction was suspended. Everything came to a standstill. A major victim of this action was Mr. Horn, who had not been paid for any of the building materials he supplied. To recoup his costs, Mr. Horn sought legal redress in the Kane County courts. A judge presided over the case, and eventually a legal settlement was made in favor of Mr. Horn. The January 28, 1921 issue of the Geneva Republican reported that the raceways along the back wall of the building were completed. As you can see in the picture, debris floating in the river will settle on the raceways, so a worker or two will be needed to stand on the platform at the river's edge and remove the debris, as is shown there. According to the local newspaper, the ice plant will be the most modern and up-to-date of any other plant along the Fox River. It was predicted that artificial ice would be produced by the latter part of April. After a period of 18 months, the June 10, 1921 local newspaper reported that the Crystal Ice Company is having financial difficulties. The businessmen have been unable to raise the necessary capital to complete the plant and purchase additional equipment. As a result, the property was placed in the name of the First National Bank of Geneva. Stuart Watson was the president. The Crystal Ice Company was renamed to the Geneva Products Company. The new company was incorporated in Springfield. At a stockholders' meeting, Mr. William Horn was chosen president, M.A. Joshua vice president, and Stuart Watson secretary-treasurer. These men, along with attorney L.C. Meade and Olaf Peterson, made up the board of directors. Mr. Horn and Mr. Meade were two of the men remaining from the original group of investors. Two men were primarily responsible for getting the machinery working and keeping it running smoothly. The first was Olaf Peterson, superintendent. The second man was Al Swanson, who had worked at the glucose plant and was knowledgeable in cooling technology. The newspaper article states that the plant will be one of the best constructed and most modern of its kind in the country. The officers of the company plan to have the company in operation by the middle of July. But the July 9, 1921 issue of the Geneva Republican reported on a new problem. The huge steel shaft, which had been ordered from the James Leffel Company in Ohio, had not arrived. This shaft is needed to connect the water wheels and the compressor. Superintendent Olaf Peterson had said that he was still hopeful of producing ice before the end of July. Meanwhile, there were exceptionally hot summer days, and there was a big demand from the city for ice. There was little choice but to purchase ice from other suppliers. One of them was the Consumer Ice Company in Aurora. On September 9th of 1921, it was reported that the new Geneva Products Company at Hamilton and River Streets had turned the corner after having successfully dealt with many setbacks. Because of the summer's hot weather, business was booming at the Geneva ice plant. Dealers in Geneva, Batavia, St. Charles, and other nearby cities were purchasing the artificial ice. The Consumers Company in Aurora had received a shipment of several railway cars, in addition to sending their trucks to pick up ice. Sutherland Ice Company in Dixon, Illinois, had ordered 17 carloads of ice to be delivered daily. Local butcher shops, grocery stores, taverns, and restaurants purchased ice. The Fargo Theater in Geneva purchased ice and used fans to blow air over 6 to 8 200-pound blocks of ice placed under the stage to cool the theater on hot summer days. The officers of the company had figured that the plant capacity would be about 72 tons a day, but during the past week, 80 tons had been produced. The business was successful. Eventually, Mr. Horn was financially able to buy all of the outstanding stock of the Geneva Products Company. A family who bought ice had a placard to place in a window indicating to the delivery man the amount needed. Maybe some of you can recall those days. Usually ice was cut into 25-pound blocks for home delivery. That was the size which would fit into most ice boxes. From my calculations, the wholesale price of a 25-pound block of ice was between 12 and 13 cents. Ice was delivered by a man in a horse-drawn wagon. The iceman had to be strong. He would sling a block of ice over his shoulders, and sometimes he had to walk up flights of stairs to make a delivery. The delivery man used ice tongs, pictured there, to pick up the block of ice and place it in the compartment of the ice box. Kids would gather around the wagon, hopeful for small pieces of ice, which were a treat on a hot summer day. The average ice box was made of wood and had 3 to 5 hinged doors. Cork or sawdust was an insulator between the inner walls, made of zinc or galvanized metal. An ice pick, which I brought today, was used to chip off small pieces of ice in the home. An important job for those who had an ice box was to empty the drip pan. If one forgot, there would be an overflow. The ice plant continued producing ice and marketing it to the satisfaction of all customers for several years. In September 1926, Mr. Horn, age 62, and his wife moved from their home in Forest Park to Geneva. They rented the house at 321 Ford Street, across from the 4th Street School. And there you see it is pictured. It still stands today and looks lovely. My husband is standing in the foreground. As their father was nearing retirement age, his son Edwin had taken charge of the ice plant, while his son William was in charge of the William Horn Structural Iron Works in Chicago. After 9 years of producing artificial ice successfully, refrigeration came on the scene about 1930. The introduction of the refrigerator meant that artificial ice was no longer in high demand, which meant the demise of the existing artificial ice plants. Business dropped off at the Geneva Products Company, and eventually the company ceased production and the ice plant closed. At the age of 69, Mr. William Horn passed away on October 27, 1933 at the Geneva Community Hospital. On April 15, 1941, the company was sold to the Jefferson Ice Company of Chicago for $30,000. The new owners modified the plant to produce what was popular then, ice cubes and crushed ice. The company installed an ice dispensing vending machine outside the building so that customers could purchase ice any time of the day or night. With the popularity and widespread use of refrigeration, the Jefferson Ice Company lost business. The Geneva location closed in the mid-50s. In 1958, the state of Illinois purchased the site of the ice plant. In 1959, the old wooden dam and the raceway alongside the ice plant were removed. Construction of the new dam began in 1960. It was completed in 1964. In 1972, the state of Illinois deeded the property to the city of Geneva for $1, with the caveat that property remained open, free of commercial, industrial, and residential structures. The vacated ice plant was demolished in the spring of 1978 by the Robinette Demolition Company of Villa Park. The yellow-colored common brick was purchased as salvage and taken to Oak Park to be used in construction. In conclusion, when you walk near the site today, you'll see that a variety of trees, shrubs, and flowering plants have been planted on the property by the Geneva Garden Club. There are benches nearby. It is a quiet, serene space for people to sit, relax, and enjoy nature along the riverbank. A dramatic change from the 20s. Now I'd like you to be aware of the sources of my material which I prepared for today's two presentations. My personal research and notes, and also internet websites, valuable sources of information. The Geneva Historical Society 50th Anniversary 1943 to 1993, published by the Geneva Historical Society 1993. A Trip Through Geneva's History by Margaret Selakovich. The First 65 Years, primarily a history of the First National Bank, compiled by William C. Wood. And also the historical information by John Butler. Thank you all for coming today and being such an attentive audience.